Hello students, this video is to discuss blog post, I think it's 423, it's the Zimmermann Telegraph, and in this lecture we're going to talk about how on earth did the United States go from almost strictly an isolationist war policy in World War I to suddenly jumping headfirst into the European experience. And without a lot of setup, let's just jump right into it. In 1915, we've looked at the Lusitania and the sinking of the Lusitania, and we looked specifically at the German military tactic called unrestricted submarine warfare. And what that was essentially is the tactic of shoot first, ask questions later when it comes to naval battles. It is the tactic in which enemy vessels of any type, cargo, freight, passenger, any non-military type, might necessarily be subjected to military action by another enemy ship. This goes against naval protocol and what is called the prize rules, and is essentially considered a war crime when a military vessel sinks, disarms, or captures a non-military vessel acting in a non-aggressive way. And so when the Lusitania was sunk in this particular fashion, America and President Wilson, in his first term as president, essentially issued the German military forces this ultimatum: either you stop the use of unrestricted submarine warfare, or basically you'll have us to deal with. Remember, there were 127 Americans aboard the Lusitania that died that day, so it was considered a huge national tragedy. At that point, there were people loudly calling out for America to join the war. This is 1915, if you do recall, and they were saying Germany has acted aggressively towards the United States. We need to silence them immediately. And President Roosevelt, former President Roosevelt, was one of those loudest voices. And so we talked about both sides. We talked about both sides of the opinions on whether or not we should join the war. We talked about those that wanted to stay isolated, and we talked about the three reasons that they might. Economic, we were trading with both the Allies and the Central Powers, and we were staying free of the cost of war, the issue with the Monroe Doctrine and maybe invalidating the Monroe Doctrine if we went to a European war, and also the difficulties when our own citizenship is so pulled in several directions based on their own ancestry, why we might not want to join the war. We talked about all of those reasons, and then we barely talked about the reasons that people might want to go to war, and all of those centered around preemptive good of the United States, and also the moral right to defend what was just and good. President Wilson erred on the side of caution, even saying so much as that we are so right we don't have to prove it by going to war. So what has changed by 1917? Well, essentially a lot. We talked about Germany needing this war to be over quickly in order to be successful. They're fighting against many powers at once and on two fronts. And so in order for them to win this war quickly, they did several brutal things that we weren't exactly prepared for as the world's theater. We weren't exactly ready for it. And those things would include attacking a neutral country, taking over a neutral country, chemical warfare, unrestricted submarine warfare, all of these things that push the envelope of too far. And they were all done for two things: to get the war done speedily and to keep the element of surprise, which was essentially Germany's best hope. Well, it's now 1917. The war has gone on 2 years longer than the Germans had hoped, and they are starting to lose steam. And so that threat in 1915 of giving up unrestricted submarine warfare, which they did for a while, that threat of America starts to seem a little bit more doable. Like, okay, well, we might have to resume unrestricted submarine warfare. We might have to continue to shoot down ships and even deal with the Americans should we have to. Even though they threatened to go to war with us, the Germans, we might need this element to push us over to victory. So weighing the considerations and weighing the options, the German forces essentially decide, okay, we're going to resume this military tactic, even if it causes the United States to go to war with us. Now, of course, the United States still didn't have any plan to go to war at the beginning of 1917. We know this because President Wilson is re-elected for his second term under the slogan, "He kept us out of war," and he had every intention to continue to do so. However, when the German army decides that they are going to resume unrestricted submarine warfare, they say, if we're going to start this again, we probably should plan on what the Americans might do when we do start it again. So their foreign secretary, a man named Arthur Zimmermann, sends the German ambassador, German ambassador to Mexico, a coded telegraph that you can see in its full entirety at the top of your blog post. So I intend for you to read exactly what was written, with an offer to take to the Mexican government. It instructed the German ambassador to go to the Mexican government to say, you know, hey, if America decides not to go neutral, we want you, Mexico, and also if you could pull a Japan in, that'd be really helpful. We want you to enter the war too on our side, and we want you, Mexico, to attack the United States from their southern borders. And if you do this, Mexico, then we will give you back all of the lands that you have lost in the Mexican-American War. So all of the western lands that used to belong to Mexico that now belong to the United States, Germany was essentially offering to give it back to Mexico should they join the war effort on Germany's side as part of the Central Powers. It's quite the telegraph, and it's quite the bold move. So when British intelligence intercepts this telegraph, they basically have one of these numbers and realize that this is exactly what they need to gain a powerful ally on their side. So being advantageous instigators, they immediately send their code broken, because they broke the code on it, they send their telegraph directly over, I think on February 1st, they send it over to President Wilson. Now President Wilson is incensed because America at this point had made no actions towards Germany at this point, and here there was this telegraph basically saying, if we're Germany, we're gonna try to attack America. So instead, this man who kept us out of war now has to make immediate actions on a seemingly imminent attack on America, both abroad and domestic. So President Wilson really shows that he is not one to be messed with in this particular few months. This happens again in February of 17, that we get a hold as America. He takes about a month, President Wilson does, to hide the paper trail, to conceal from Germany where exactly America got this information. Again, it would be very dangerous to British intelligence if Germans knew that they could break their codes. We wanted them to still use the same codes, not knowing that they had been broken. And so he takes about a month to hide the trail. And then President Wilson does a real bold move. Says, okay, you're going to send this really bold telegraph, or I'm going to one up. I'm going to get all of my popular support. I'm going to get the entire country of America on my side, because I'm going to publish your bold telegraph on the cover of almost every major newspaper on March 1st, 1917. So when when the Americans the next morning open their newspapers, they see the full telegraph that you can read at the top of the blog, the full threat of Germany against the American people. And it can only have two reactions. Either you can believe the telegraph in its full entirety and think we have no other choice now but to defend ourselves and to go to war, or you can think that the telegraph is fake. This is a fabrication. Wilson just wants to take us to war. We shouldn't do it. And so the small minority of Americans that believed that the telegraph that they were reading in their papers was a fake or some sort of ruse to get America into the war were immediately silenced when German Foreign Secretary Zimmermann, the author of the note, basically said when asked, like, yeah, I did it. Like, I sent that. Definitely. Doesn't it make sense? Like, if they're going to attack us, shouldn't I plan for a counterattack? This is war, people. And so he basically had a duh. Of course I sent that. That's the smart thing to do. So with him just flatly not denying that he did this at all, there was no longer any threat that this telegraph could be fake. Therefore, the American people really had no other choice but to support this new war effort because they were now threatened. The last, essentially, hold my earrings moment that America had before entering into this fight. So this happened on March 1st that we published it, and then Zimmermann about end of March was like, yeah, I did that. On April 1st, 1917, Germany essentially decided, well, we should cut our losses. America's probably going to go to war with us in a few days. Maybe Mexico will end it. You know what? We're just going to start our unrestricted submarine warfare again. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to shoot down we're going to sink an American cargo ship. This is how we show how much we care if America comes to war or not. And so on April 1st, they sink an American cargo ship called the SS Aztec off of the coast of France. And so at that point, America was like, hold my earrings, hold my shoes, we're about to fight. It took all of one day for President Wilson to go to Congress and ask him to draft a declaration of war against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and other Central Powers. And on April 7th, 6 days after the Aztec was sunk, and 3 months after the receipt of the Zimmermann Telegraph, we are now at war with Germany. And so that is, in a nutshell, the very quick turn of events that led from the United States suddenly not being part of this war at all to, I'm gonna get me some Germans, all within a short period of time. Again, the German military had made essentially no effort whatsoever to try to dispel this narrative of this evil, villainous Germans, because they simply did not care. And the American people, now once divided on the war effort, were now almost unanimously in support. And so one thing that I want you to think about is the situation that has changed between 1915 and 1917. Almost all of you said that it was wise in 1915 for America not to join World War I. Do you still feel that way, knowing how things happened in 1917? Do you think that maybe if America had entered in 1915, maybe the events of 1917 wouldn't have happened? Was America entering the war inevitable, or could people have somehow avoided war altogether? These are questions I want you to think about. Is President Wilson a hypocrite for not wanting war and then suddenly going to war? Or is he a wise political leader? There are a lot of questions that we could talk about with this specific incident. Was Zimmermann amoral to make this offer to Mexico? Mexico didn't accept, by the way. They basically were like, we didn't ask them to tell us this, so no. And they officially declined the offer in front of the entire world and basically were like, don't look at us, we didn't do anything. And they continued to remain out of it. But these are things that I want you to consider when we're talking about that in class today. This will be your last blog post for the week. If you have any questions, please let me know.